South East Radio's Business Matters with Karl Fitzpatrick.
Well, my final guest this morning is a resident economist, Marc Coleman. Marc, Irish economic statistics remain a hugely confusing mix in terms of understanding what is actually going on. According to GDP figures, we're in a technical recession. However, pre-budget debates warn of the danger of the economy overheating. So what is actually going on here, and what actions should the government take?
There is overheating in the economy because while growth has been going gangbusters, the economy has expanded by 2/3 in the last 6 or 7 years. That's phenomenal by any economist's standard. The domestic economy has been crushed by what is relative to its turnover, a much higher burden of taxation and a much higher cost base, the non-traded cost base of the domestic indigenous, the mom and pop store, the bed and breakfast, the garage mechanic. The people who can't export are facing all the challenges of the rising costs, which are caused in turn largely recently by fuel, but in the long term by housing costs, while the international sector can take those pressures in its stride and can pass them on in the international market. The immediate response, in my view, is first of all not to worry about the ESRI or Fiscal Council warning about tax cuts. That is utter and complete nonsense. Cutting taxes will help with the consequences of inflation and cost of living increases. It will not damage inflation. Why? Because when you give money to the private sector, it spends it efficiently in markets where there are price competition. The immediate response to inflation is to stop wasting money on monopolistic spending, tackle the cartels. We've seen RTE being tackled. Now look at some of the semi-states that have had a monopoly for far too long. Look at areas where there's a lack of price competition in what we call the non-traded sector. So think of all the costs that are faced by the indigenous economy that you can't get away from. You can't use a German bank. You can't go to a German insurance company. You can't go to a German solicitor or a Dutch solicitor. It's those costs where you're trapped and reliant on an uncompetitive or an imperfect market. That needs to be tackled. And the second thing that needs to be done there is the Commission for Consumer Protection and Competition needs to be split up. It's doing good work on consumer protection, but that needs to be put together with the Citizens Information Bureau. I've put those two together as a citizens and consumers watchdog. Take the competition aspect of the Commission for Consumer Protection Commission and turn it into a really tough watchdog. And then the final thing to do with on inflation and the cost of living is if we do not roll out affordable housing at a much faster rate than we're doing, we will remain the most expensive place to live. And the only people who will be able to afford to live here, Karl, are the wealthier immigrants who are coming in, the Google executives, the LinkedIn executives with the 150, 200 grand salaries. So that is what we have to do. The housing crisis is as big a crisis for us now as was the unemployment crisis 40 years ago. And it will not, I repeat, not be solved by any individual government. Don't blame an individual government. Blame a system of government and a PR system that just doesn't work anymore. The solution to that is an all-party Oireachtas consensus and a 10-year plan. And I just hope that I don't have to make that point again in 10 years, but I fear that I will.
Well, if you've just tuned in, that was our resident economist, Marc Coleman. And Marc will be back with us again next Saturday morning.
South East Radio's Business Matters with Karl Fitzpatrick.